Welcome back. Busy time for lawmakers up in our nation's capital right now. Bills are being proposed left and right, and one of them is being proposed by Greg Steube, who represents the 17th District here in Florida. Congressman, first of all, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What can you tell us about this bill? It looks like it's going to have a big impact on a lot of folks who live here on the Suncoast, a bill for veterans.
Yeah, I've always been a veteran and served in Operation Iraqi Freedom, always made it a priority to file bills that will help our veterans and our veteran community. So one of the things that when a veteran organization sets up some type of activity on federal lands or wants to come to Washington, D.C. and have a veteran activity or event, they have to pay fees. They have to pay some type of special event fee. So what this bill would do, and I have bipartisan support, would waive any fees for a veteran-related event here in D.C. on federal lands.
And that makes a big difference, because when you're talking about, a lot of these fundraisers or they're having to raise funds to be able to afford these sorts of fees, it does make a difference.
It makes a huge difference, especially for some of these veterans that may be Korea, World War II, Vietnam era veterans who don't have the financial resources, or their organization doesn't have the financial resources to pay these permit fees. So I think it'll have a great impact on encouraging veterans to come to Washington and express their views on veteran-related issues.
All right, so this has been introduced now. What path does it take, and what kind of other support do you have on this?
So if we can get a number of co-sponsors, then we could go on a calendar that doesn't have to go through the committee process. So something that's not controversial, that is widely supported. So it's my hope to work the process that way, get a lot of co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle, and hopefully to get on a calendar that we can just get it voted on in the next few weeks, few months. If that doesn't happen and we aren't able to get the co-sponsors necessary, then it should go through the committee process. I sit on the Veterans Affairs Committee, so I would think that the Speaker would refer that bill to the Veterans Affairs Committee where I sit. So hopefully we can get enough co-sponsors to move it through the process and not have to go through the committees. And if so, I'll be on that committee that'll have the opportunity to vet that legislation.
Sounds like you've got a convoluted and a somewhat less convoluted path to take. How early would we be able to see these fees waived for the veterans if it does all go through?
So we filed it. If it passes soon, it should be in the next year or so, the next fiscal year. The president would have to sign it and have to go through the Senate, but I would think a bill like this that would have a lot of support and makes a lot of common sense to do for our veterans would go through the process pretty quickly, but we'd have to wait for the president to sign the bill.
Common sense and going through quickly. Sometimes you'd think it happens, and
that in Congress sometimes don't go together.
Exactly. Hey, hold on for just a minute. I want to talk to you a little bit about a bill that you're putting forth about daylight saving time, and the fact that it's getting a little bit more traction right now, including someone on Twitter earlier this week saying he would be okay with it. We'll talk more about that in just a second. We are continuing our conversation with Congressman Greg Steube. And welcome back. We're joined by Congressman Greg Steube, Florida's 17th District, through the magic of modern telecommunications. We already spoke a little bit about a bill to free veterans groups from fees. And Congressman, I know we spoke last week about your bill working with Senator Rubio and Congressman Buchanan about daylight saving time. And since last week, especially after Sunday when we lost that hour of sleep, this has gained a lot of traction. Even President Trump tweeting about how he's in support of the bill. What has the reaction been up there in Washington?
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because members of my staff commented how they're having to get adjusted to the time change and it's difficult for them to adjust. So it's something certainly that's widely supported with the American people. We passed it in Florida last year, and with the president now tweeting about it, I had a meeting with Senator Rubio this week, and he said that they're getting a lot of positive feedback and thinks it's actually something that we can get through the process. So it would be interesting to see something bipartisan that we could get through the House and the Senate that the president has already acknowledged that he would sign.
And this is something, again, that I think one way or the other, if it's daylight saving time or if it goes back to standard time, one way or the other, let's just make a call and stick to it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Senator Rubio and I talked about. When I filed the bill in Florida, one of the discussions we had was, what would people prefer, to be in standard time all the time or be in daylight savings time. And the majority of people, especially in Florida, was they preferred daylight savings time. So Senator Rubio and I, either one of us don't care which one we stay in. I would like the American people to give us their opinion on that. But I just don't think we should be switching our clocks back and forth every single year when it makes absolutely no sense to do that, and is detrimentally, negatively affecting especially school children and adjusting to their school calendar. So I prefer daylight savings time. When we moved it through the process in Florida, it was about 80% of Floridians preferred daylight savings time, but I encourage Americans to let us know what they prefer, and hopefully as this bill moves through the process, we won't have to change our clock back ever again.
That would be good news, at least from this American and constituent here.
That's right.
Want to talk to you a little bit about a resolution now that is actually trying to censure or call out another member of Congress for some anti-Semitic remarks, and you're working on that bill as well.
Yeah, I just signed it. It should be filed today. We've got a couple of co-sponsors for that, and I'm actually reaching out to some of the members in the Democratic caucus to see if they would be willing to stand against anti-Semitism. She made some very inappropriate remarks.
This would be Representative Omar, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
And we had an anti-Semitic resolution that we debated and we all talked about, and I believe everybody unanimously voted for it. Then she made some more anti-Semitic remarks that are all detailed in this resolution, and it turned into a resolution on bigotry. They didn't want to call her specifically out. And when you make remarks like that as a congressman or woman, you have to understand that your words matter. And there was a lot of folks in the Jewish community that I've spoke to that were offended by the language that she used. And I think that we, as Congress, should call out those anti-Semitic remarks for what they were and condemn the remarks that she made publicly and her anti-Semitic remarks.
And not do the kind of thing where one person makes a bad comment to a customer and then the memo comes out to entire staff. Please don't make bad comments to customers, instead of actually talking to the person who's really responsible for the offense.
Well, and the whole resolution that we voted on last week was all because of her anti-Semitic remarks. So why are we not going to specifically address that? And, you know, there's a lot of folks in the Jewish community that lived in Florida and live in Florida, and I think it's important that we stand with them.
All right. Congressman Greg Steube, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you joining us once again.